All right, Judge, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, you told me before we started you have a tough time sitting still.
It'll be all I can do to sit in this chair for this hour, I promise you. I'll get excited and I'll start trying to get up.
But you know, Hardy Gregory was here earlier in the semester, and he actually stood up and walked around, ruined the video. But
the story was great.
Yeah, the story was great. So thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. How did it come about that you became a lawyer?
I have watched many of the videos from your class, and I'm going to do my best not to repeat somebody else's story. But when I grew up, my dad was a cop. He was a GBI agent. I idolized my dad, so I wanted to be a cop. He immediately said, "That's not happening because I want you to be able to pay your bills." So I said, "Okay, I'll be an FBI agent." And so I'll go to law school to be an FBI agent. I met my wife in law school. She said, "No, we are not going to be traveling all over the country, moving from LA to Chicago to New York before you settle down." So that idea went out the window. So I said, "Okay, I'll be a prosecutor." And so I did that, and immediately almost realized that I loved the job. The job was wonderful. I was going broke in a hurry because of student loans, things like that. And at that time, this was 1990, we were making $29,000 a year, and that was with a raise. That was not going to work for my family. So I went out on my own about 3 years later, having left the thing that I thought I would always do, which was be part of law enforcement. And then I became, 3 years later of being in private practice, I had the true general practice. I did everything. I decided I wasn't going to do things that had rules. So I didn't do bankruptcy. I didn't do workers' comp. I didn't do Social Security disability. They had too many rules. But I did pretty much everything else. And then I was asked to be an associate magistrate judge from my experience being a prosecutor. So I was the assistant guy. I was the guy who worked weekends and nights and wrote warrants in the middle of the night and those sort of things. Eventually becoming the chief magistrate through an election, the magistrate decided he didn't want to run again. And then ultimately Governor Perdue, who I tell everybody is the greatest governor Georgia's ever had, because he appointed me a Superior Court judge. And now I'm in my 7th year of that.
Like rules. Now I'm stuck. A lot of rules that bind you.
Yeah, we have lots of rules, but I knew civil procedure rules. I knew evidence rules. I knew the stuff that I knew. But you know that when you leave law school, one of the things that law school probably does not do as well is teach you how to practice law. It teaches you how to think about law. It teaches you how to understand theories of law, but where you file this and what you put on that form, law schools, it's incapable, really. This isn't the institution to do that. So I learned those things practicing law, but I just knew, I guess I knew what I didn't know and what I was not willing to learn. So I would do car wrecks, criminal defense, I would do corporations, I would do trusts and wills and estates. I didn't want to do things that required a great deal of you have to know Rule 493. It's not completely different than professionalism. I mean, you and I had a conversation before we began. I couldn't tell you what Canon X, Canon 2, Canon 3 of the Judicial Code of Georgia. You know, we have a separate code of ethics than just lawyers do. Couldn't tell you what that says, but I know the net effect of them. And that was the thing that as long as I could tell you the concepts of practicing law, then I was fine. It was just when you had to know rule number 3, 7, 9, whatever, that just wasn't for me.
Well, most of these students are in the middle of a civil procedure course where they're learning a lot of rules, so
yes.
let's not dishearten them.
Learn the concepts, you'll be all right.
Learn the rules, you'll be all right. Go back for a minute. You said you loved being a prosecutor.
Oh, yeah.
And for the practical reasons, couldn't continue it. What did you love about it? What was so great?
You know, wearing the white hat's really cool. You go to the cocktail party, and you don't have to answer how do you defend those scumbags. You know, you don't have to explain to people, look, the Constitution works both ways. The Constitution is the only thing that protects whatever group you find yourself to be a member of from being persecuted, right? So if you decide, if whoever they is, the government, the power brokers, if they decided to no longer like people with dark hair, if you didn't make Miranda apply when it was some other group that was targeted, then it wouldn't be relevant. Wait, that's not a sound bite you can sell in a cocktail party. That's a deep conversation that we have in here. So when you are the prosecutor, everybody knows, you know, you're the white hat guy. You're always the good guy. But I will tell you that one of the things that I found the most rewarding is that having grown up with a cop, you know, the world's very white and black. There was very little gray in my growing up world. And you were either good or you were bad. But when you see some of the people who are preyed upon the most by criminals, who are the weakest, quite honestly, usually among us, you start feeling a great deal of pride being able to vindicate their wrongs as a prosecutor. When you realize that it's not, that you are probably the only chance they ever had to experience what justice feels like when they are the victims. Now, to be honest with you, even the defendants, those who commit crimes, I mean, I think if I took a show of hands and I said, how many of you are here are really glad you didn't get caught for everything you ever did in life, it'd be a pretty wide show of hands. Yeah, me too. So you have to be able to show that compassion and that judgment, but at some point they let you go try cases. And it's close. I was an athlete growing up, and I was also involved in different sort of drama things and different things. It was as close to that adrenaline rush as I could get without losing a knee, you know? and it was great. It was wonderful. And so that's why I really loved it.
Well, and I think it's really important for the students to hear that it's not just a mission, it's just fun.
Oh, at some point it is the greatest fun, in my mind, you'll ever have, and you can't commit malpractice. So it's really good. You know,
Never thought of that.
Nobody can sue you.
General practice is it's disappeared.
Absolutely.
The order of the day is specialization, and you didn't do that. What did you like about having that kind of wide range of things?
Sometimes you have to know yourself, and you have to know that at some point, the Weight Pageant that he sees in the mirror, at some point I get bored, quite frankly. If I always put round pegs in round holes and square pegs in square holes, at some point I get tired of that. And so I knew that I mean, there's an upside and a downside to it, because at some point I got to constantly see new and exciting things that weren't just like yesterday's. The downside being I was never the man. I was never the specialist. I was never the guy who was the most versed in tort law or evidence law or wills and estates or whatever. And so that was a little scary. I mean, there was a part of you that was always sort of going, man, I really hope I'm drafting this 20-year lease for my contract from my client correctly, because if not, there's 20 years of a problem. I mean, you're constantly afraid of doing those sorts of things incorrectly. But I also knew that I knew myself well enough to know that if I just did insurance defense or if I just did plaintiff's work, at some point I would get bored.
But while you're doing this, I mean, you're practicing law, you're also running a business.
Absolutely.
Law school, I trust, did absolutely nothing to teach you how to run a business.
True.
How did you learn?
I came from a cop and a teacher. So I've heard that some of the people who have spoke to you are families of lawyers who have practiced law before. People in my family had never been self-employed. You lived for the government pension. You tried to find a government gig and have retirement. So I had no idea what I was doing. And there was a lot of trial and error, and there was a lot of error. But to be honest with you, I decided that, you know, there were computer programs available and there was all these things to do it. But I went really slow and started off in sort of the pen and paper route. And then after I was comfortable with the concepts of I mean, I was a history major. I didn't even take any accounting classes or anything in undergrad. So it was something that I just did it by trial and error. And I will tell you that most people that go out on their own now, they are petrified to go out on their own because they don't know how to do it. And they think that there is a single right way to do it. There is no book. There is no single right. If any of you are planning to go on your own, God bless you, but there is no single right way to do it. There are concepts that are bright lines. Don't mess with the money. Don't make sure you keep that straight. Make sure that you understand that the degree that you end up with and the bar license you ultimately end up with, that you have no client that it's worth losing that for. So when your client wants you to do something messed up, you just don't do it. You give them all of their money back. You don't ever let $500 or $1,200 or whatever the answer is ever come between you and your bar license. And you give it back to them, and you wish them well. That's what Wade did. Wade gave back a lot more money when he was asked to do things that I thought were inappropriate or not in keeping with how I wanted to live my practice, how I wanted to be able to do things. And I gave it back. I gave it all back to him. I don't care how much I had earned. There was no such thing as you retain me and you change your mind and it's a non-refundable retainer. Your $5,000 was not going to cost me my bar license. It wasn't going to happen. So, and I've seen a lot of my lawyer friends have to respond to bar complaints for their non-refundable retainers. And the less I heard from the State Bar of Georgia, the better off I was going to be.
Well, now the State Bar does have some resources for
yeah,
people
absolutely.
going out on their own, but
Yeah.
You're talking about the disciplinary
Yeah, the
side.
disciplinary side, right.
No fun there. In this transition, these years, most young lawyers find a mentor, right? Who was yours?
I had formal and informal mentors. When I was a third year, I was at Georgia State, and Tom Jones, who is a retired now prosecutor in Fulton County, hired 2 or 3 of us to work in their, I think people at Georgia call it prosecutorial clinic. We call it Tom Jones's class. But we got to try cases. I tried a murder before I graduated law school. And so, I loved trying cases. That was my thing. So Tom was a huge impact on sort of my style, I guess, because he was very quick to tell you, you look stupid, stand up, that kind of stuff. In practice, I was lucky enough to be the young gun surrounded by very good prosecutors, very good people, good human beings. And when I got into private practice, I really went out on my own. But I had some informal people. We had this lunch group that we developed, that there were 7 of us, 8 of us, that were about the same station in our careers, that we would meet for lunch on the 3rd Tuesday of every month. We just decided we were going to be at that restaurant 3rd Tuesday every month. And that's where you brought your problems. That's where you brought the cases you didn't get. Do you think I can do this? Does this feel right to you? No, you can't do that. And we would talk about it. And it was basically a peer group that was probably the most formative in my actual practice of law, because I was a solo. When I left the DA's office, I was solo from that point forward. And so my mentors were that. I am very much a mentor to younger lawyers, and it's because I felt like that I was a bit orphaned when I went out on my own, made my own experience, and that everything felt a lot harder than it needed to be because I didn't have a senior partner or a true mentor. We did not have some of the mentorship opportunities that the bar created later in practice. I always offered to be a mentor and never had that career, but I had law clerks that worked for me that you might call staff attorneys. They're people who are lawyers who are coming out to clerks and judges. And the entire year or 2 that they are with me, all I do is explain why. They understand the how. They understand you put this form with this form and it meets this checklist and they give it to the judge for signature. But I start explaining to them why this ruling, why this procedure, so that a lot of the people who leave us can practice law successfully on their own.
Do you also mentor younger judges?
Yes. You've actually met one. A few weeks ago, I think Judge Verda Colvin was here. All right, she was one of them that we taught. And the reason what has happened is that when you're first year judge, Superior Court judge, you went to this class and they would give you 1 hour of criminal, 1 hour of domestic, 1 hour. You know, you can't even hardly get started talking about the entire topic of domestic relations, the entire topic of criminal law in an hour. That's crazy. So Judge Tane Kell, who's from Cobb County, and I took over this program this year. And it has been a resounding success. About the first part of this month, I was actually here on the day that you met, and we met at the other end of the hall because 3 more judges had been appointed since our last meeting in January. We didn't want them to go 11 months effectively without a mentor, without anybody to talk to. But as judges, we wanted to make sure that you take the time out, because the world, if you think the world's going by you really fast right now, when you become a judge, you've got political issues, you've got winding up practice issues, you have got new facility issues, and a caseload growing by the day waiting on you. And all of that comes at you right now. As soon as the governor makes the announcement, you hug your family and friends and you start immediately saying, uh-oh, what have I gotten into? So we try to say, slow down. Let's look at this at a more global, let's get away from the 400 feet, let's get to the 10,000 feet and look at what we're trying to do here. Both legally with the law that's in the notebooks and the trial outlines and those things, yeah, we got all that. But what kind of judge do you want to be? Because you will see, for those of you who have not been in the courtroom very much, and I'm sorry I keep talking about courtrooms so much, some of my best friends never practiced law once, but for those of you who are going to be in courtrooms, you'll have judges that are abusive. They don't probably mean to be, it just happened. So we talk to the new judges about, give me the characteristics of those that you really love to appear in front of. Give me the characteristics of those judges that you cringe when your case was assigned to them. Tell me what those characteristics made you cringe. The one really funny thing is that nowhere on that board is how smart you are. I've done this several times now. The listing of compassion, patience, being on time, I mean, all sort of practical things. The things that made you cringe, the main things that made you cringe is that they tried to embarrass you and that they were never on time and all the opposites of those. Nowhere on either list was how smart they were. And so the judges need to feel reconfirmed that you got appointed for a reason. The people, if you were a nutbag, the people in your bar would have let somebody know that. Okay? They would have told the governor, this guy's a fruitcake, do not appoint him to anything. And so at the end of the day, you try to reassure them that do what you do because it got you here. You know?
Let's talk about being the chief magistrate. That's a court that we really have not talked about with this group, and it is a world unto itself.
Oh, very much so.
Tell the students a little bit about what kinds of things you saw and maybe how it's different from what maybe they expect in a big, grand, superior court type of setting.
Magistrate court is it is absolutely a land all unto itself. You have a lot of non-lawyer magistrates in Georgia, and understand that generally you would never look at a magistrate and say this is the hierarchy, this is the importance of courts. It is, however, an entry-level people's court. It is that place where you go to do lots and lots of different things. Things such as, I want to have a warrant sworn out for somebody who needs to be arrested criminally. Magistrates do that. I want to have somebody evicted who's not paying rent. Magistrates do that. I want to file a small claim against somebody, a claim that where the amount in controversy is less than $15,000. Well, that's a lot of court cases, to be honest with you. Magistrate court does that. I want to there are 10 different things that magistrate court does that are not probably on your radar as a general concept. But they do handle torts, they do handle contracts, they do handle criminal law. They do all the preliminary hearings, they do all the first appearance hearings. So there's a lot of administrative things that they do that can be very, very important. It is, if you have ever watched People's Court, that is magistrate court. You get people that walk in and they don't own the right kind of clothes to come to court, and the stories they have to tell you. One of the first cases I ever heard, I am Mr. Lawyer, I got my tie on and I got a robe on and I'm very important, we're going to be very excited. One of the first cases I heard was a dog got off of the property and killed the neighbor's goats, and how much were those goats worth? Promise you, that was the kind of stuff that you heard in magistrate court. And it was just, you are the justice that a lot of people you're the most justice they will ever get. And they have a controversy they can't come work out. Now, some people abuse magistrate court. Some of the landlords particularly would be abusive in the magistrate court situation and constantly file evictions to try to get reimbursed money they weren't really entitled to just, long story short, it is people's court, and it is something to behold. You are told that you are bound by the laws of the state of Georgia, but there's nobody in there that knows what a 12B6 motion to dismiss is. They have no idea. And so you're supposed to kind of walk them through what they're trying to do here, and the magistrates get a lot of caution not to practice law for people, because at some point that's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of folks in magistrate court are not represented.
I would say 90% are not represented.
So you've got pro se against pro se, one after another. And judges have different philosophies on this, I know, about dealing with pro se litigants. What was your philosophy?
I think that some people graduate from law school and think that they became a member of a different caste system, that somehow they became a different class in society, and they forget where they came from and where their aunt came from and where their daddy came from. They're lawyers, by God, and they are somehow elitist, some other function in society. When I deal with pro ses, I look at it two ways. Number one, lawyers, Lamar Sizemore said this one day in one of your seminars. I saw it on YouTube. He said, at some point, remember you were once a lawyer. That's a really good first rule, because at some point I want to make sure that lawyers continue to have business. The pro ses that I see, particularly in domestic relations, and that's growing exponentially, there's not a client for a lawyer in that group. There's nobody in there that can pay any sort of retainer or fee. It's not something. Some of them are being cheap. Some of them are trying to cut a corner. Most of them don't own a home. Most of them don't have a car. Most of them are just trying to get divorced because they don't want to be married to that person anymore. So I still deal with pro ses a great deal. And in pro se land, I'm trying to understand what it is you're trying to do. I mean, at some point, people have seen some stuff on TV and they use some words that they cannot even pronounce or use correctly. They use them in the wrong context. And at some point, you're trying to just tell me what you're trying to do, and let's work backward from there. But at the same time, to be fair, all the other people have to file a child support worksheet, and they have to file a civil case initiation form, and they have to go to the parenting seminar, and they have in magistrate court, they have to first file the notice. I'm not going to give you a substantive different angle, but at least I can explain to you these are your requirements. I mean, we still have a lot of people in Augusta, and I'm sure you do everywhere, that are illiterate, or at least functionally illiterate, and they have learned where to sign their. We've got a lot of people. I can't tell you the number of people with 8th and 9th grade education. In 2015, they're usually in criminal court, quite frankly, and we could go into a sociology study of that. But I can't tell you the number of people. You have to be aware that some people are trying to fool you into thinking they can read, they can write, when in reality they cannot. and they're being obstinate because they're embarrassed. So
that's a slice of life you don't anticipate.
no, and I will tell you that you become, I don't know, I didn't take a lot of sociology, but you become a sociologist when you're a judge. Because you are the person who is somewhat the gatekeeper of whether some of the people in front of you are going to become the latest statistic or not. Whatever the issue is, whether it be criminal, civil, or whatever. And you start learning a lot about people, and if you, I know this sounds ridiculously base for me to say this, but you came from people, you are people. I mean, somehow people, I think, when they become lawyers, forget all of those things, and they are performers or something. I mean, at some point, you have people's lives in your hand. That's why this is so stressful, y'all. That's why law school is so stressful. Because at some point, we're going to give you a license that's going to allow you to put people's lives in your hands. Straight up. Whether it be criminal, civil, all their money, all their life, whatever. At some point, you have that authority. And if you can't take this stress, you definitely can't take that stress. And so that's why they push you so hard. That's why they give you more to read than you can read. That's why all of this is the way that it is because at some point you've got to be able to cobble it together and save somebody's life. Financially, actual, whatever. So.
As you know, Judge, this is a class about professionalism for lawyers. And I know that that's a subject that is very important to you.
It is.
So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it means to you. What does that term mean? And why is it so important to you?
It's a quality of life thing for me. At some point, I know I'm sounding incredibly selfish up here, but at some point, professionalism to me makes a lot of sense because this job that you have now embarked upon is, they call it the old jealous mistress story, and there's 1,000 different analogies for it, but at some point, you have to understand that however much time you have, this job that you're about to embark on can take. However much you want to give it. So why waste the amount of time that you have in a, sorry about this camera, pissing contest with somebody over nothing?
I think they've heard that term.
Okay, all right. You get into these things, these ego battles with lawyers. So now you're more concentrating on getting over or getting even with somebody who made you look bad. So therefore, you've got to make them look bad back, which of course means they have to make you look bad back. Remember, there's a client in here getting smushed while you're doing all that. I'm not going to send you the discovery. You're not going to send me the discovery. I'm going to send you a dirty letter. You're going to send me a dirty letter. At some point, this is a quality of life thing. If I know the case that I need to address on Monday, I only have to address one thing on the weekend. So maybe I still see my spouse or my kids or do my thing or whatever. But when I am so ill prepared, I don't know which fire is going to break out on Monday, then I've got to prepare for all of them. So now I've got to spend all weekend in a funk worrying about Monday instead of enjoying my life, instead of doing those things that I want to do. Professionalism to me, I have seen some lawyers, and I know y'all had people that have had examples. I had a lawyer one time in a domestic relations case when I was in practice write a letter to somebody that was not my client at the time. This person received the letter and therefore came and saw a lawyer. In the letter, the guy who was in fact a veteran, he wrote a letter and he said, you need to pay your child support, you haven't been paying, here's the breakdown. The second paragraph of the letter said, just so that you know, I am a former airborne ranger, and I know how to address people who don't do the right things. What? And it went on from there, and I don't remember the details of it right now, but basically it was a threat. It was not a threat that I'm going to sue you. It was, I'm an airborne ranger, and I guess I'm going to jump out of an airplane and jump on your house or something. How did that move that forward? That didn't move anything forward. Now it became personal, and there was some allegation because the person who owed the money was a man, and this guy was a man, and so he was going to be a man, and who was a real man. At some point, remember, if you do litigation particularly, at some point you're leaving their life. At some point, these people who created this child, let's use domestic relations for a minute, they created this child, they're going to be the ones going back to the science fair and the ball game and the graduation. And if you just simply throw bombs back and forth just to see how bad you can hurt each other, because that's what they want you to do. It's exactly what they want you to do. Because they're hurt. So they want you to hurt the person that hurt them. You're their hired gun, so to speak. At some point, you need to let them let that go and get their life back. You know, I tell people all the time, and this may not be directly related. I have no idea what the question is you asked me. At some point, you have to understand that people have seen on TV that lawyers, I am going to get my lawyer means I didn't do anything wrong. That's their response. Sir, you're under arrest. I'm going to call my lawyer. All right. Get out of that. Whatever you need to do is fine. But you're still under arrest and you're going to the back of the patrol car. At some point, that has become our society's sort of answer to the question. That lawyers are the answer somehow to the question. And it doesn't mean I have to do right anymore, and it doesn't mean anything about that. And I think that I tried very hard to tell my clients that they don't issue you a crystal ball or a magic wand when they give you a bar license. You can't change the decades of stupidity that they have exhibited that landed them in front of you, right? So you can't shake the ball and get a new Ouija ball answer. That's not how it works. I've got to deal with the facts as you brought them to me. Unfortunately, I think lawyers who leave law school now leave here with the memory of one professionalism rule. You owe a duty of zealous representation. And that lawyers get all twisted up into not understanding that that's only one of the rules. That's not the rule. And that in the pursuit of zealous representation, I can do anything I want. I can say whatever I want. I can hurt whoever I need to hurt because I am zealously representing my client. At some point, you are the lawyer. You're not their mama, you're not their daddy, you're not their brother. You are the lawyer. You tell them how the legal system works. They don't tell you. That's why you see a lot of people in discovery disputes over, no, you can't have an extension. I remember seeing some of the people who sat here talk about extensions. Let me just give you an example with that. You know that I'm assuming y'all know, that within about 30 days of service, you have to file an answer. Okay, everybody kind of with that idea? A lawyer, if you're not, at some point, somebody's going to call you and say, hey man, my kid's got a ball game tonight, and they just sent me this file. Are you okay if you give me through the weekend to get this answer to you? That's your call. You don't say, I'm going to call my client and see if they're okay with it. What do you think the client's going to say? You mean we could catch him in a trap? Yeah, I'm down with that. Don't call your client about that. That's your call. That's not their call to make. You run the litigation. They run their lives. They bring you the facts, but you run the litigation. And professionalism is so important to me because I think lawyers get messed up on the zealous representation rule, and they think that is the end-all and be-all and justifies everything. And it's not.
One of the things we haven't talked about in here that I think you are maybe uniquely situated to talk about is what professionalism means for judges. We've got some future judges in this room.
Absolutely.
And we've got a lot of people here who will appear before judges who have varying degrees of professionalism. You know that's true, Your Honor.
As long as you don't ask me to comment or name names, we're good.
What professionalism issues are there out there for judges that the student should anticipate?
Remember that judges, to a large part, are going to be governed by forces that are completely irrelevant to your client's matter. In other words, things like time, things like case counts. things like space considerations, depending on which circuit you're in. If you have a judge that travels 6 or 7 counties in a circuit, which a lot of them do, they're only going to be here once every 6 weeks or 7 weeks. So judges, I want to tell you that you have 210 Superior Court judges in Georgia, at least positions, for all of the millions that live here in Georgia. Out of those 210, they are some of the most impressive human beings you've ever met. People you want to be the judges. You know, there's that movie, and I'm not trying to draw an analogy of A Few Good Men, where Jack Nicholson is saying, not everybody can be on that wall. You won't be on that wall. You've got people in your superior courts that you want on that bench. They're the type of people you need there. You've got a few, and I hope there are very few that have no business there, because they have forgotten what it was like to practice law. They have forgotten what it was like to have a client. They have forgotten what it was like to what it felt like when they graduated law school. You know, when you leave law school, at least I hope you do, I hope you have a passion for helping people. You know, when people ask you, why did you apply for law school, most of you did not say, so I'll get a bigger paycheck than I would if I was an accountant. I mean, that's not why you came. Somebody at some point in this room said, I want to help people. How many people at some point during some application process said, I want to be a lawyer so I can help people? Right? I mean, don't forget that. Don't stop doing that. And judges, unfortunately, get caught up in the grind of, I've got to move cases, I've got to move cases, I've got to move cases. And they forget that at some point their client hired this lawyer to say some words. Let them say some words. It doesn't matter if they are persuasive words. That does not mean, on the other hand, you get the microphone and you get to make a speech on whatever topic and however long you need to do it. That's the other side of the coin. Judges also have canons. And we have issues that sometimes don't immediately become apparent. For example, we are elected officials. So we need to politic. We need to go to political meetings. But there are a lot of rules that say that we can't go to certain political meetings. We can't put somebody's yard sign for vote for somebody for council. We can't put that in our yard. Because we can't be on the fundraising committee at our church. You start thinking about that, you go, why is that? Well, at some point, you're the judge. And if somebody else on the committee or somebody else as a church member may or may not want to give, but they think they got a case in front of you, or one day they're going to have a case in front of you, they'll give you some money just to make sure you're my boy. And that never crossed my mind. I've done that before I became a judge. It never crossed my mind that would be an issue. We can't be on the Chamber of Commerce because they raise money. So as much as judges, I don't want you to think that it's a horrible existence or anything, but at some point, judges, I think, forget where they came from as well. You will hear the term 100 times, robitis, and any judge that tells you no, you will say, oh, he's got robitis. Well, sometimes what you're asking is stupid, you know? but some judges do have robitis. And they are the robe, therefore they have gone to the elite of the elite, and they have moved to the head of that class. And I think those are one of the most, when you read ethics opinions for lawyers, I mean, I hope y'all read those from time to time, the people who get disbarred, and you go, well, what were you thinking, right? Well, when we read them for judges, it's usually a power trip. That's usually what gets judges in big trouble. That they are the unchecked power. Your jokes are always funnier. People laugh a little louder because you're the judge. And so you go to a room full of lawyers and everybody's yucking it up, and you tell the latest joke and they just roar in laughter. They leave and go, man, what a fool, right? But you don't. It's the emperor's new clothes syndrome sometimes. The judges don't know that they are actually the laughingstock of their bar because they are not prepared, they are not on time, they're not They don't live the life. See, for example, let me just give you an example. I don't drink in public now. I enjoy having a beer from time to time. And a couple of you I may have seen last night, but I was out of town. You see? Because we used to have a judge who would just get hammered and drive home. And then he would get on the bench in a DUI case and preach like it was Sunday. And all the clients may have been impressed with that presentation, but all of us who were at the bar party or the Christmas party or whatever, we didn't take him seriously. I mean, he was a hypocrite. And so I immediately knew, now this is internal, I immediately knew I wasn't going to be that guy. But I'll be honest with you, I would be willing to bet all the money that I have that person, that judge, got pulled over more than once and was taken home by a policeman because they knew who he was. That's not right. But that's what happens when you're the judge, because everybody wants to look out for the judge. I mean, one of our judges one day got a speeding ticket. The sheriff went crazy because the officer didn't know that was the judge. Man, you shouldn't have written him a ticket. What are you doing? He called the judge. I'm so sorry we wrote you a ticket. The judge says, I was speeding. I went and paid my ticket. You see, that's where you start getting judges who understand that they are not Zeus and Apollo, that they are not some sort of gods that come down from somewhere and have some superpower.
Before I turn this over to the students, Judge, I always give, as you know, our guests the opportunity to say anything you want to say, any advice.
I'm afraid I might have already done that.
Well, that's okay too, but if there's anything else that you think the students need to hear, any advice maybe you wish you had had when you were a first-year law student, this is a free shot.
When I was a first-year law student, I told you what I came from. I came from a teacher and a cop. So the idea of a Miranda warning, I'd heard that before, but the idea of being a lawyer and what was a widget and the whole concept of a white acre and a black acre and a this and that, I didn't have any idea what they were talking about. I'd never seen a deed. You know, I mean, so understand that that they were concepts. I didn't understand the words, much less the legal concepts. And some of you probably come from lawyers or people who have had law backgrounds. Some of you probably don't. And this adventure that you have launched upon is exciting. It's wonderful. There are no people that I would rather hang around with than people who are based in law, because I think they understand our society at a level that is much beyond talking heads on this news channel or that news channel. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that the continued success of our chosen profession, and you have already become a member of that fraternity, bar passage or not, is now contingent upon you and making it better than you found it. Unfortunately, too many of us, when I saw all the hands go up, virtually everybody in the room said, I want to help somebody. At some point, if you talk to lawyers 10 years out, the most important issue is how much money do I make? When that gets twisted up, when the one will take care of the other. Helping people will help you make a living. But when you are out in public, you have to understand lawyer jokes aren't funny. You know, when you hear everybody, several people will write, the first thing we'll do is kill all the lawyers. That's ancient and olden. Yeah, because you don't want anybody to check the power of the government. That's why. Not because lawyers are such bad human beings, some of them are. But it's because you are the only thing that stands really between where does this country, where does our society go from here. I'm not trying to be too speechy and moralistic and all of those sorts of things and too far away from reality. But you were, you know, they say all politics are local, all professionalism is local. It's how you end up interacting with your peer group. You are professionalism in the next generation. There's only so much I can do. I can make rules. I can rule from the bench, but at some point, it's how you interact with your fellow lawyer. That is professionalism. in my opinion.
What questions do we have?
I would love if y'all would ask me questions. Yes, sir.
You spoke a lot about sociology and society, and I was wondering...
Which I know nothing about, but go ahead.
I was wondering whether you think a judge should just keep like tunnel vision on the case before him, or whether a judge has a responsibility to kind of positively affect the social narrative, or look at the broad scheme of things and how each case will affect those bigger problems or bigger society issues.
Just to restate the question in a very basic way, should a judge keep tunnel focus or myopic focus on the case in front of him or her, or should they be worried about the impact on society? To say that both of those things aren't true would be absolutely untrue. That is going on 24/7. I think the judge will tell you, I'm going to do the right thing for this person, but the whole concept of precedent. I mean, you've learned that. I don't want to set a bad precedent, not only between these two individuals, but more globally. At some point, one of the things judges try to do is be consistent. We want you, as a practicing lawyer, to come in front of us and kind of know what my deal is. If my deal is be on time, if my deal is be prepared, if my deal is I'm all about Rule 43, I'm just making up a number, then you need to know that. If suddenly I don't care, in mid-case, I'm going to do something I've never done before, now you have no way to talk to your client and act like you have a clue. So as judges, what I'm trying to tell people is be consistent. I told you I was an athlete. I'm kind of crazy about sports. There's a lot of great analogies. Umpires in baseball, the strike zone's supposed to be basically from your shoulders to your knees and over the plate. If you start in the first inning and you call balls that are a little below the knee a strike, you won't hear a word from anybody. It's when you get in the seventh inning and you suddenly call that same thing a ball that all game long had been a strike, people will lose their minds. That's when they come out of the dugouts and whatnot. Same thing with judges. We are trying to be consistent. So, it would be absolutely a wrong answer for me to answer your question that we don't care about the precedent, the social setting. We do. But you can't judge a case in a vacuum. I mean, a lot of the cases that you study, for example, are in somewhat of a vacuum. You have this many facts. You don't know what the jury looks like, what town you're in, is it snowing. You don't have a clue. Some of that stuff matters, some of it doesn't. But the one thing that I will tell you is that we try our best to give justice based upon the facts of this case. As I tell people, I try to take a Polaroid picture, it spits out the picture, and I'm not going to guess what the future holds. I'm going on these facts in this picture, and not what might be or could be. Okay? So in your question, should we? Probably. We should make this an academic exercise, but at some point you don't want a robot or a computer as a judge. You want somebody that has a clue about what we're trying to do as a society as
well. If there was some way that on your deathbed, one of the last thoughts that you had was, I am the luckiest human being on the planet because I got to do blank. Professionally, whatever. Right? What would it be? If you could go somewhere from here and that be your ultimate attainment, what would it be?
This is going to sound incredibly corny because my son's in the room. But if I get on nobody's going to write on your tombstone, I always was there first, I was always there last. I worked the hardest. Nobody cares. They'll tell you they care. They'll tell you it's all about image. But if you didn't do anything while you were there, it doesn't really matter. Okay? The thing that I will tell you that is the most important to me is if I was a good father and spouse. My professional life allowed me to do that, not the other way around. And so in my life, what has always been the most important to me is what is happening in my house. And the relationship, I am the most blessed man in the world. I have some of the best friends you have ever, I have a pile of people I know who would carry my casket. And I don't mean to be funny, but if you ever think about that, who would carry your casket? I kind of know who that is if I die right now. Matter of fact, I may have too many people. What a blessing that is. But you are not going to you're not going to be happy there if you're not happy professionally. You're never going to have that fulfillment of life if this big part of your life where you spend much more than any 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, much more than that. If that is out of whack, the other can't be in whack. Okay? So you have to be professionally satisfied. But I will never, ever be able to tell anybody that I will be on my deathbed. I'd be very glad if somebody says he was a great judge, if he was a great lawyer. Not my focus would be elsewhere. Yes, sir. Do you have a follow?
I was saying, like, I definitely think about, like, your relationship with the Lord and your family and everything like that. I'm saying not one of the last thoughts, but when you get to the end,
next to last thought.
whenever the last thought is about your professional life and what you did with it, if you could say that there was some job that you did that was the ultimate dream job,
This is it.
The manager of the Yankees or whatever it may be.
For professionally.
Yes.
This is it. Because this is the kind of guy I am, and it's just everybody's wired differently. This is who I am. I have jury trials in front of me. I had 20 jury trials last year. So if that tells you, we are trying the fool out of some cases. I am an evidence freak. Oh, I love talking about evidence. When that says a lot about me, too. When we have a jury trial, the next week, I call the lawyers and take them to lunch. I say, tell me why you did this. Dude, you know that you flip your pen when you're nervous. You know you jiggle your chain. Why do you keep walking back and forth? Be still. Because, to be honest with you, unless it's videotaped, you don't know that. I am always trying to help young lawyers. In exchange, when I tell them, hey, you did this wrong, they listen to me. I don't get a fist fight on everything. I don't get this big thing of, Judge, I didn't have time to go to the jail, so let me go talk to my client now. They go do their job too, because of their level of, they know that I'm all in with them. I'm interested in their careers. So if I was just a prosecutor, I couldn't do that. If I was just a defense lawyer, I couldn't do that. If I was just a civil litigator, I couldn't do that. But as a judge, I sort of get a chance to touch and move a lot of those different pieces around some. And this is the most important thing that I've ever done. And I am now 49 and I've been here 7 years. So I was a relatively young Superior Court judge. It is weird. As a judge, though, I will tell you this. Time, you have no track of time. Because Monday is just like Tuesday. Tuesdays are just like Wednesdays. And Thursdays of this week, if that's what we do on Thursdays, it can be this month, last month, or the month before. All of a sudden, it kind of blurs by you at an alarming rate because you're on the bench. And as a judge, the one thing that I would beg of lawyers, please be prepared. Please give a dang about your client and actually open the file and get your notes set up before you come in my office and just thumb through and know where your stuff is. I will help you resolve your dispute. I will be fair and reasonable in that pursuit. Don't make me work to try to do your job too. You know? What else? Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
How have you, you talked a little bit about the stress, of practicing law and then being a judge. How have you managed to manage that stress in order to retain that compassion that first brought you to law school?
The question is, how do you manage stress in order to maintain the passion that first brought you to law school? I'm hopeful that I still have that level of passion. And obviously that wanes a little bit as you get older, but I'm hopeful that I retain that. One of the biggest, I'm going to answer your question by going a long way. One of the biggest reasons lawyers get disbarred or there are significant ethical issues is because lawyers try to manage their stress with drugs and alcohol. And I can't tell you the number of people that I know that have tried to manage that stress with drugs and alcohol. It is such a losing proposition, and it temporarily soothes your pain, and so you can't convince anybody to listen to you, and you reach out to your friends and you say, please stop, and next thing you know, they're, in big trouble, they have had a wreck and hurt somebody, they are arrested, whatever. I was so afraid of that whatever the opposite of that stress management tool was what I did. Because I knew myself, and I knew that at some point, if you start drinking a little, you're going to drink a lot. And the next thing you know, you're going to do something you shouldn't have done, and there's going to be this whole snowball of problems. I have done so many things other than be a lawyer and a judge in my life. I mean, for example, I was a Superior Court judge, and I was coaching the defensive line at Greenboro High School. I would leave every day in time to make practice, and then I would be the defensive line coach for free. I wouldn't let anybody pay me. That was important. But I would coach Little League this and that. I would oversee lawyer competitions, the mock trial competitions. I probably should have run more and lifted more and done those other things more, but it is what it is. But I don't know if everybody knows this. My wife is also a judge. My wife is also a lawyer. And so I said earlier we met in law school. I probably should have finished that thought. She is the probate judge. We are the only couple in Georgia that husband and wife are both judges. And sometimes we will sit around and go, can you believe this? Can you believe this is what we're doing? And it's a real credit to us that people allow us to do that. But the stress management issue has to be personal. The same reason I was a general practice, because I knew I would get bored. You have to know yourself. Whatever your thing is, you have to create it, and it has to be your escape valve, and it cannot be drugs and alcohol. I can't tell you how many people, you hear it all the time on TV. I had a terrible day. Man, I need a drink. No, you don't. You need to go do something. You need to go walk around the mall, something. I don't know what you need to do, but that's not the answer to the question. I want a drink. It's a casual afternoon and everything's good. Okay. But it can't be your stress relief, because 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 6, 6 becomes 12, and the next thing you know, you've got a raging drug and alcohol problem. Y'all, if you haven't heard me say anything today, hear me say this. This drug and alcohol thing is real. And among those of us in our profession, it is a significant problem. And if you find yourself saying, I am stressed out, I have got to go have a beer to unwind or whatever, slow your roll, because I'm telling you, it's coming around, and you're going to see it, and it is the source of the most professionalism problems we have in our profession now.
Judge, I'd like to keep doing this, but we're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.